Hi, folks. All right, we made it here today. I am working on new technology, so if you saw the earlier little mistake there, just ignore that. That was nothing. Ignore the man behind the curtain. Anyway, as you can see, I am with you here today in my garden, and we're going to talk about gardening today because because I think gardening is really important right now. One of the things that happens when we're stuck at home is that we really want to spend some time outdoors. And the safest way to do that right at this particular moment really and truly is to just enjoy gardening. Please don't think that you have to garden in some grand era like I have beds that I put in 8 years ago. They're huge. For a side garden or a backyard garden, they're huge. And there's no reason for them to be so big if that's not what you're into. I happen to be wanting to do this, so that changes how I'm dealing with it. Um, all right, let's see. I wanted to talk to you about the gardening that I did yesterday, and there is a video that is coming of it. There's going to be imagery of me and my grandson working back there in the garden doing all the planting, and I will be editing that and bringing it to you as a more finished product at some point. But today, I just wanted to talk about gardening in general. So, you can garden in anything, okay? I spent one summer when we were between homes and we really didn't know when we were going to be anyplace. I grew tomatoes in pots. I grew peas in a pot with a stick in it. You don't have to be doing anything special. Did you know that you can grow carrots, 4 carrots, in a 2-liter pop bottle, soda bottle? You can grow things in milk jugs. You can grow things in takeout containers. You can grow things oh, for heaven's sakes, you can grow things in grocery bags if you really want to. Okay? You don't have to have anything special. You need dirt and something to hold the dirt. That's it. And seeds. And seeds are available all over the place. You can get them at the dollar store if you just want to go for cheap because you need to grow something to be sane. Or you can grow all heritage stuff, which is what I generally tend to do. So what I planted yesterday was in the bed that's right here, this one, I planted kale and leeks. So the kale is in the no, the kale is to the side, that side. And it grows up, the one that I have is a mix, and it should grow up to be about 1.5 feet tall. So not huge, but certainly large enough. And kale, especially in the early days, really requires a lot of weeding and caring for. So I wanted to make sure that it was in a place that I could get to easily and that I could weed well. The leeks, which are beautiful, I don't know if you can see them, the green screen eats the picture. But the leeks are basically, if you're not familiar with them, they're like foot tall, maybe 1.5 feet tall green onions. They're just big ones. I like using them partly because they're very much a medieval food. Leeks are easy to grow, and you can eat them early, and they're more like green onions or scallions, or you can let them grow to absolutely humongous size and use them as you would any onion. They have a kind of a mild onion flavor. It's not very strong, so if you have problems getting your kids to eat onions, this might be the way to go. It also, like if you're doing a stew or something, it has a tendency to kind of disappear into it. It turns to mush and dissolves, leaving behind the flavor, but not the texture, which is what a lot of kids object to. And I have a wonderful potato leek soup that I will be sharing with you guys. And I probably will actually make over the fire this summer just because it's so delish. And it's something that's fairly easy for me to make on camera and share with you guys. In the next bed over, and I'm going to just try and get out of the way here. Maybe if I go this way. right here, over my elbow. You can see that there's a trellis there, and that's where my peas are. Peas are Easy to grow, very easy to grow. Stick them in, they'll grow. That's why they grow them in kindergarten classes and they send them home on Mother's Day. But they need something to climb on. So if you're growing them in a pot, you can just provide a stick that's a couple feet high, or a couple of sticks, or one of those little dollar store decorative trellises, whatever you want. You can, if you're like me, I have chicken wire on 3 stakes that they can grow up, and I plant down both sides. So I have 20 feet of green peas. Now my peas are shelling peas. That means you don't eat the pods. However, you don't have to throw away the pods. They do have uses. You can make wine from pea pods. Pea pod wine is supposed to be very good. But I like shelling peas because I have a firm, stolid belief that all children should be forced at some point in their lives to shell peas on the porch. I think it grows moral character and it's good for them. Yeah. Oh, and to the person who told me that kale was a way, what did my garden ever do to me? Kale is really yummy. I'm going to tell you guys about green powder another time. In the back bed, which is just over my shoulder here, that bed right there, I planted purple top turnips. Those don't show up very well. There they go. Purple top turnips, which are little ones. They're like fist sized, and they have greens that come up about 8 inches or so. And I planted Napa cabbage, which doesn't show up at all, of course, because it's green. So purple top turnips are very period to the medieval era. It's very similar to the turnips that they would have had, and we have depictions of them, and they're pretty great. One of the reasons that they're so good as opposed to rutabagas, which we grow here in North America just as often as turnips, and which have a similar flavor, but turnips have greens that you can eat. And while you can eat turnip greens, or rutabaga greens, they're not very good. They tend to be fairly bitter. I love the turnip greens. They're very light. They're slightly bitter, so they can be tossed in with like spinach for making a pie. They can be put into stews and soups. But again, for me, it's bunny food, and it's also a good source of vitamins and minerals, which I put into my green powder. So that's the purple top turnips. Napa cabbage I grew because it is really fast to grow. Okay, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It looks kind of like a cylinder, about yay big. If you've seen Alien, the pods, yeah, they looks like that. Napa cabbage has tight leaves that stick together, and it grows about a foot tall, and it takes only about a month and a half to 2 months for it to grow. That makes it a very fast cabbage. And I planted 10 feet of this because I love Napa cabbage. Among other things, you can dehydrate it and then later on stick it in water, rehydrate it, throw it in your soups and stews, and it's just as delicious as the day that you dehydrated it. It can also be parboiled, frozen, although it tends to be a bit mushy when you rehydrate it, when you defrost it. And it can be turned into green powder. Again, I'll get to that. So that was planted. So I have 10 feet of kale. I have 10 feet of leeks. I have 20 feet of peas, 10 feet of purple top turnips, and 10 feet of Napa cabbage that I planted so far. And then in this tire right here, I split this in half, and I actually use this as my root crops. So I have planted both beets and carrots. Let's see if I can get it to show up on the screen there. No, it doesn't work very well. There we go. Beets and carrots. I like Danvers half-long carrots. So you know the grocery store, you can get the giant carrots that are like a foot and a half long and they're really thick. Danvers half-longs are that thick and half the length. And so what that means is that when they're growing, the reason that you get funny shaped carrots is that they're growing and they hit a rock or a hard clump of clay or whatever and they split, and that's why you get funny shapes. Danvers half-longs are only half as long as full-size carrots, and so what that means is they're less likely to hit rocks and they come out much more straight, and they have the most amazing carrot flavor. They have lovely big green tops, which bunnies absolutely adore. and which can be eaten by humans. I tend not to eat them just as greens, but we will dehydrate them and put them into green powder. I also did golden beets as opposed to red beets, because if you've ever cut up red beets, you know you get red on your hands, you get red on your clothes, you get red in your sink, you get red on your cutting board, you get red on your knife, you get red everywhere. It's just everywhere, and you can't get rid of it, and it's awful, and it stains. Well, Mistress Leary introduced me to golden beets, which are actually much more period to the medieval time. And they have this beautiful golden interior and kind of an orangey outside. And they have the most intense beet flavor. They are delicious, not as messy, and they have really nice greens as well. The tops of beets can be eaten, and they are quite tasty. And you can use them like lettuce wraps. You can use them any place you would use a cabbage. You can use them in stir fries, and you can dehydrate them for green powder. Carrots and beets both need to be thinned as they come up. So you sort of sprinkle them in, and then as they grow up, they're going to clump together because there's nothing you can do to stop that. Well, as you're thinning them out, you want them to be at least, a couple of inches apart so they have room to grow and they don't deform one another. Those ones that you pick out can actually be chopped up and eaten. There's no reason not to. Bunnies love them. And if you have any kind of animal that likes to eat greens, they will be very happy with that. And they can also be turned into green powder. In the same bed, in this bed here, I also plant radishes, and I do this every year. I mix my beet and my carrot seeds with radishes because the radish seeds are much larger. And as I spread them, they cause it to be more evenly spaced. And on top of that, they also give me another crop, and they also they grow so fast. So like the beets take, they take how long? Mature roots in 55 days, so like 2 months, okay? Radishes are good in 20 days. You're going to be eating them before the end of the month, before your beets or your carrots have even really started to make decent roots. So they aerate the soil for you so you don't have to do as much work. And radishes are completely edible top to bottom, okay? So when you pull up your radishes, you have that lovely red globe. And in medieval times, they stewed those. You could eat them cooked. They make the greatest curries. They have a very mild, almost turnipy flavor, and they're pretty, and they're bite size, and they're a lot easier to carry than great big rutabagas. And if you don't have turnips on hand, they're a good substitute. They're also fun to just eat raw. But the greens, radish greens are just a little bit spicy. They have kind of like a peppery flavor to them, but not overwhelming. Like I'm white girl walking. I don't like spicy things, and I love radish greens. And what I do with them is I will toss them a little bit into salads. They have to be really well cleaned though, because they're kind of almost like fuzzy. So you give them a good scrubbing. Or you can dehydrate them and put them into green powder. Which brings me to green powder. So I make green powder every year. And I make red powder every year. Green powder is a lot easier though. We have a farm share which we get each year. And a good chunk of what we get home is a variety of greens. And that includes leeks, onions, cabbage of 2 or 3 different kinds, radishes, carrots, and we get all the greens with them. Beet greens, spinach, arugula, and there's only so much you can eat in a week, and we get our share every week. So over the summer, the first year we had this share, some of the greens went off and they turned into mush in the back of the fridge, which is both a waste and a mess. So what I started doing was I popped out my handy Nesco dehydrator and I lay out layers of greens, stems, leaves, just not the roots, and I dehydrate them. And when they've all been dehydrated, I stick them in the blender or the food processor and I powder them. That powder goes into a jar which is labeled greens or green powder. And I mix it all together. So there's a little bit of onion in there. Sometimes I'll put in some garlic greens or garlic scapes. which are the little curly things that grow up at the top of garlic after it's matured. All of those can be dehydrated, and they have flavor to them, lots of it, and they have nutrition. So while dehydrated greens don't have quite as much nutrients in them as fresh greens, they have a lot. And I need you to remember that when I go in that jar today to put a spoonful of green powder into my stew, not only does it add flavor, but like 1 tablespoon of green powder is essentially an entire cabbage. They're greens are mostly water, so when you dehydrate them, they compact, and then you powder them and they compact even more. So what you end up with is this really nutrient dense, lovely flavored thing that has a hint of garlic, a hint of onion, a little bit of the pepperiness of some of the other things I put in, and it just packs such a nutritional wallop. And you can put it into doughs, you can put it into bread, you can put it into pastas that you're making, pasta sauces, soups, stews, like anything you can think of that you would use regular, like oregano or something, you can do that. And I do that with the spices too. If I have herbs left in the garden at the end of the year, or I pull in some to the kitchen because I'm making something and I don't use all of them, they go right into